Yo, can we rap? Like,
Rap?
yeah.
Maybe we can sit. I think everybody's like jet lagged by now. Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
Oh man, it's been one of those days. So yeah, we are here to debate whether the future of stablecoin market structure is going to be winner take most, or whether we're going to see hundreds or even 1,000 stablecoins coexisting. So yeah, just to kick it off, I guess, do you guys want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, maybe I can go. My name is Benjamin. I've been doing stablecoins for a bit. Before this, I did Qidao. People call it very different things. And now I'm doing Cap.
Yeah, I'm Seraphim from Ethena. Before I used to do Lido. Before I used to do Crack. I'm just kidding. I used to do TradFi, which is worse. And yeah,
You doing TradFi?
I used to do like emerging market effects swaps, shit like that. Yeah.
Nice. I was in M&A, so I guess we're all TradFi people here. Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, I think sort of the crux of this debate is kind of like thinking about stablecoin moats and how the industry is going to look in the next 5, 10, 15 years. We've seen for like tech companies, they tend to be sort of like winner take most markets. But then if you look at financial services and banking, there's hundreds or thousands of banks in the U.S. even now. So there's some precedent for either of these sides of the debate prevailing, I guess. But I guess the first thing that I'd like to drill down on is economies of scale. So like if you think about a stablecoin like Tether, it's quoted that they have like the highest revenue and profit per employee of any company, just not even crypto, but any company in the world. So do you think that stablecoins have like an important factor of like economy of scale? Does that advantage big stablecoins versus small?
Yeah, definitely. But I think that's just life. Like, winner usually takes most, if not everything. And Tether have simply been around for so long. They have the ultimate liquidity profile and integrations. And I think the biggest integration that Tether has done so well is just being integrated into centralized exchanges as perp collateral, and then eventually as a way to transact between retail and emerging markets. That's just, obviously, we're thinking about these things a lot at Ethena. And even though I think we're at the forefront of that, we just see how much of an advantage Tether have because they've been around for a long time. And I just don't see that it would be so easy to come in and just say, okay, we're going to take over this now.
I think it depends what game you're playing, because the way we look at it, there's only two reasons you would have a stablecoin. It's either yield or it's either storage of value. And if you're storing value, yeah, there's huge economies of scale, particularly because people don't see you as money until you have billions of dollars with you, right? The only one that really got that is Tether. Circle maybe, but Tether really won that game. For interest-bearing stablecoins, it's very different because there are some games that can't get big. For example, like the V token flywheels, like Frax got big because they were basically extracting value from the CRV emissions. But if they got like another, 40 billion, they wouldn't have been very good because that's not the game they're playing. Same with like any standalone stablecoin that has like one or two strategies. Like you also don't want to get too big because then the yield is going to be very bad. So maybe there's like the opposite effect of economies of scale.
Interesting, yeah. Network effects and anti-network effects. I guess so. Like Tether, you guys, kind of both acknowledge that like they've like almost crossed a chasm of like reaching some level of lendiness, kind of because they're so early. Do you think that there's a way for smaller stablecoins, Ben? Do you think there's a way for smaller stablecoins to like kind of break in and have that like brand value that Tether has?
And I think this is part of like why I think there's going to be 1,000 stablecoins, and that's because, let's look at this storage of value. In the future, every single centralized exchange is going to have their own stablecoin. Every single region is going to have a prevailing stablecoin. The only reason that Tether is doing well now is because there's no regulations. Like we don't really know what's going on. But like just in the same way that Venmo doesn't work in China, Venmo doesn't work in France. It's like all about regulatory advantages and regional connections because it's like a people game, right? And so when we have good regulations, I think it's over for Tether. I think everybody in their own regions is going to have a stablecoin. And I hope for Tether's sake that they move to a stablecoin as a service thing, kind of like a Paxos, because it's going to be great for the smaller ones. Now, not to ramble for too long, but then if you're doing the other side, which is the yield-bearing stablecoins, then your mode is, can you do something that the others cannot do? And if you can, then yeah, for sure there can be entrants. For example, Tether can't do a funding rate arbitrage. So yeah, if you can do something like this, then you can, enter.
I saw you making faces there.
No, yeah, I mean, I think there have been attempts by centralized exchanges to replicate certain products, like the LST space. Obviously, Binance ETH is a thing, MEF is a thing, yet they don't seem to have the success that they probably envisioned initially, similar to Lido. And I think it's just a structural way centralized exchanges work. They're just big, bureaucratic, corporate. It's very hard to push actual growth within these structures, just on a ground level. That's what I've seen. And if you leave it to somebody like Lido a couple of years back, they were just, this is the only focus we've got, and we're going to get it done. Whereas centralized exchanges seem to just have constraints that we in DeFi don't. Secondly, exchanges did try to create their own stablecoins, but they mostly failed. And even if you look at Binance with BUSD, you can argue that's a one-off because of regulatory kind of capture that happens. But even FDUSD, which is a great team, they just don't seem to have that traction in spite of all that support that they got from Binance. So my theory is just there's a structural kind of break that these internal projects encounter. And when you leave it to third parties like Ethena to do it, and our strategy was just to get all the centralized exchange on the cap table, get all of them to hopefully integrate us. That's when we can really push the execution that they can't do internally. So I think the execution in the space is just so hard that just because somebody has regulatory or like moat, like a centralized exchange, doesn't mean they're going to succeed. And so far, that's not what happened, right?
I guess that's like a very product-heavy argument, because you say, we can move fast, but then the exchanges will say, well, the banks are large bureaucratic institutions, but we can move faster. And then the banks will look at the governments and say, the governments move slow, but it's all about like size. If you're very, very small, you can move faster. But if you are at the size of Tether, you will become slower. And so I don't think it's a matter of product. I think it's a matter of relationships. Like, I don't know, look at most countries like Vietnam, Thailand. You're not going to come into Thailand with a cool product and like become big. You're going to be friends with people. Or like same with Vietnam, same with like most countries in the world, it's like a people business.
Interesting. And I recall you were mentioning like regulation as like maybe a factor driving less consolidation, like more different stable coins and like localization. Do you think there's like a risk of like big dominant stable coins like Tether or Circle doing like a regulatory capture playbook and trying to sort of win the market through regulation rather than having it be like localizing?
Actually, I think it's going to be very interesting. Right now, we have the biggest stablecoins being store value stablecoins. I think the future is going to be backwards. So right now, like Tether, USDC are 10 times bigger than all of the other, literally 10 times bigger than the interest-bearing stablecoins. I think that's going to flip. My thesis is that there is going to be some sort of regulatory capture, and it's going to be regional. And then the big stablecoins are the ones that are going to be able to take these regional centralized stablecoins and do something with it that users won't be able to do. And in this case, it's yield. I think if you can provide yield for all these stablecoins, then you're going to have these layers on top that transcend the regional boundaries. And because of that, they're going to be much bigger. And that's what we're doing at CAP.
Nice. So one thing that I think we've seen drive like a lot of scale in certain stablecoins is integrations. So like if you can get on Aave and be used as collateral, suddenly you can tap into the billions and billions of dollars that are there. How do you think, like as either a large or a smaller project, do you think you have like a unique value prop that you're bringing to potential partners? Maybe Seraphim, you can take.
Yeah, I think within the dollar asset space, what we do very well is APY at scale. It's very hard to replicate what we do just because it requires operational legal structures rather than simply a smart contract. So I think we're the only ones that can scale in terms of high APYs to tens of billions of dollars as a mix, if you take the mix of RWA and what we do now. yeah, I think from that perspective, we bring a unique value. And also, I think the fact that there's lots of TradFi institutions that kind of use Ethena, taking these guys into markets like Aave, even though TVL-wise it isn't that big, is probably good for the industry and makes it very appealing to work with us. Because obviously, guys like Brett and Howard were big investors, they're LPs, there's a bunch of like pretty big TradFi hedge funds that interact with us because of the way we structure the product. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it, I think interest-bearing stablecoins have not scaled. Like, the biggest one we have right now is SDAI, right? And it's significantly smaller. I think there's only $1 billion in the SDAI contract right now, compared to $155 billion with USDC and Circle. And that's because we're not tapping into enough yield. So when you say integrations, I actually don't think about it like outside of the protocol. I think behind the protocol, how much integrations can you do? So like the way we work is like CAP allows many different agents, be it Ethena, be it Centrifuge, be it other sources of yield that are like good at generating yield maybe for a certain amount of TVL, lets them contribute to the overall stack of generation of yield. I think until we are able to have more integrations on the back end, we won't be able to scale yield. I wouldn't be so worried about like the other side, like the Aaves and stuff like this, because I think these are like small games. Like Tether doesn't play these games, right? I think you need to think fundamentally around how are we generating this yield and what kind of integrations we're doing in the back end.
And yeah, I think Tether, we've mentioned them a lot. They're kind of in a unique position of...
They're in the room. But
yeah,
they're
in a league of their own for sure. They have been able to run this huge stablecoin project without really paying out any of the yield, hardly at all. And Circle, to a lesser extent, has had some success. Maker, to a much lesser extent, a little bit of success of like getting people to just hold the stablecoin, and kind of use it as a medium of exchange rather than just holding it for the yield. Do you think that there's any prospect for either a bigger stablecoin or maybe a smaller stablecoin, or an ecosystem of many stablecoins achieving that in the future, or is the book closed on getting users to hold your stable without paying them for it?
Yeah, the dream is to keep all that revenue. We had like 130 million in revenue year to date. I'd love to keep all that, obviously. I'm expensive. I like to spend. So, I think the problem is, at the moment, we're in a stage where we have to pay out the APY so that people actually use it. But I do foresee a future where, subject to certain integrations, there comes a point where we could start charging a bit more in terms of take rate. We can go from 0 or 10% to 20%, 30%. And as we keep growing, hopefully eventually we just pay 0. And I think that will be done, at least in our mind, through deals with distribution centers in the fintech space, in the banking space. And as we gradually capture that market, we'll just start to probably, and I'm just assuming, we'll be increasing the take rate to the point where maybe we don't have to pay anything, basically, or pay out to only certain counterparties. And that means we can just have more revenue, just like a classic business cycle of spending a lot, giving a lot back, and then eventually keeping a lot of the revenue. So, definitely on the cards for us, I think.
Yeah, I think it depends, again, what game you're playing, because I don't think you can be a good interest-bearing stablecoin and also be a good store value stablecoin. I think they're completely different things. And there's a lot of space for new entrants in the storage, like store value stablecoins. Look at Brazil. Very soon, all of the people that transact in Brazil with their money will have a stablecoin, whether they like it or not. And so automatically it's going to be bigger than Tether because the Brazilian economy is huge. So that's how I see those going. It's like users don't really have a choice about what they're going to use. It's basically going to be what the governments or the large companies decide is going to be the storage of value stablecoins because they have this mode. And then I think for us, the interest-bearing stablecoins, our mode will be, can we do enough? Can we do things that can't be done outside? And that's why I think it will never work out if you just have a team executing things. Like you need to have a distributed system of people contributing to your stack in order for you to do things that other stablecoins won't be able to do.
I feel like obviously the biggest interest for people outside of Western markets is just preserve value. Obviously, if you live in Turkey, and even if you have dollars, if that's parked with banks, the banks could take it away. So just having the dollar is amazing, even without the yield. But there's a yield at the point where no one's going to care anymore about like the government-based dollars. If the government was barely able to force people to not use dollars but to use the local currency, how likely it is that in this open DeFi world where you can transact whatever you like, that these guys are going to keep holding their Brazilian dollars. I feel like they're just going to look at Ethena and say, hey, 20%, I'd rather swap into that and just start doing DeFi things, basically.
I think, well, there's two things there. One is like, yeah, probably not Brazil is a good example for this because Brazil has an amazing economy and they're like their banking system works. Argentina, Venezuela, Nigeria, maybe, I think those will be more of a battleground. Yeah, I mean, like these people don't save money. It's not like most countries, people don't save money. Like people just hold and they just pay or like they use remittances. But people don't say like, you know, there's yield, let me go, because they're not saving money.
Well, maybe for Seraphim, I'll ask you this. So like we've seen Tether and to a lesser extent Circle have a pretty dominant position among stablecoins. In a sense, you could say that the winner take most outcome is already playing out a little bit. Does that leave any space for a newer stablecoin like Ethena or like anything else like Usual or something like that? Is there room for you all to succeed if it does be like a winner take most market structure? Yeah,
I mean, this whole space is based in optimism and defying the current worldview. So I think we wouldn't be doing this if we didn't think we'd actually have a shot. The question is how to execute. I feel like execution is getting harder and harder with every year, where last cycle you just fork something, throw more tokens, you grow. This cycle is getting to the point where you can do anything if you really want to. You just need very strong partners, very aligned incentives with the really big guys. It's just anything is possible as long as you have the right backers and the right execution. So I just don't see why we couldn't do it. We just need to very often, like the competitor makes a mistake and then you just happen to be suddenly not the third but the first. Like if this happens all the time, so I don't see why we couldn't do that too, right?
Well, we're coming up close to time, but I'd say let's just wrap up with if you guys could each give like a kind of like what's your vision for 10 years out? What does the market structure of stablecoins look like?
Maybe I could start. I think there's going to be obviously 1,000, 2,000, 10,000 stablecoins because while they all share the same name stablecoin, they're used for very different things. I think like if you want yield specifically from funding rate arbitrage or you only want exposure to centralized exchanges, you might go to Ethena. If you want just T-bills, you might do Ondo. If you want leverage yield, you would do SDAI. I think most people will want to have some sort of like abstracted away yield-bearing stablecoin that can adapt to yield depending on how the markets change. I think that's obviously I'm biased because of cap, but I think that structure will win long term. But I think there's not going to be one guy or one protocol that wins. There's just going to be, because there's so many use cases for stablecoins, and let's not even talk about like alternative currencies. There can't be one stablecoin.
Yeah, I think there may be 1,000 stablecoins, but the distribution would definitely not be linear. It would be, as usually in life, a few guys get everything or most of it. And this would be probably similar to, if you look at the tech industry, we have the same guys of the last 20 years. Like, there's an open AI even every now and then, but realistically, what's the churn compared to 20 years ago? Or the banking in terms of assets under management? Yes, there's thousands of banks, but how concentrated is the balance sheet amongst the top 10? It's pretty much the same. So I feel like we thought about this, right? We added RWA to the balance sheet. So now at some point we had $900 million of RWA. We were bigger than the whole RWA combined, just because we added that and we're very nimble. So I feel like we can keep adding different exposures as long as there's interest for that, and that's probably why we're going to see 1,000 stablecoins, but top 10 would probably account for 80% of all the TVL, and that's just how life goes, I feel like.
All right, well, thank you guys so much. Thanks for having us, Stable Summit.